Hey guys, this week's video of Backfist like a Bushi, which is part 3, is going to focus on the concept of angular momentum. Now, angular momentum is a little bit more tricky to explain than linear momentum and kinetic energy. So I'm not really going to go into the equation for angular momentum. In essence, the equation is moment of inertia multiplied by angular velocity. If you don't do physics, that's going to mean absolutely nothing to you. So to understand angular momentum, I just want to show you a little demonstration. Because we need to use angular momentum to generate, to be able to knock our opponent off when we're rotating. So I'm going to use this chair to demonstrate a really simple principle of angular momentum. So when we're talking about angular momentum, we're talking about momentum that is rotational. So anything that's spinning. So I need to consider the axis around which I'm rotating, which for the purposes of this is the base of the chair. And the two things that really matter the most when we're talking about angular momentum is where my mass is positioned relative to my central axis. So because my central axis is here, I'm going to rotate around this point. If my mass is far away from that point, the simple fact is I'm going to be going slower. And so what I want to do in order to generate greater angular speed is I need to bring my mass, my moment of inertia, much closer to the centre. So let me show you what I mean. If I spin on the chair and get myself going, I'm going to keep my mass very close. So I'm going at a reasonable speed. If I stick my arms out, I slow. If I bring them in, I speed up again. And then I slow. So when I bring my mass close to the centre, if I have a little bit of speed and start out here, then pull my hands in, I get fast. And then slow down when I bring my mass away from that centre point. So when we're doing any kind of technique where I'm going to rotate or spin really quickly and I'm going to use angular momentum, I always have to have in the back of my mind, where is my pivot point, which point of my technique am I rotating around, and how can I make sure in order to generate speed that I keep my mass as close as possible to that. Okay? So we're going to carry on with our backfist techniques with one of the spinning versions. So quite often, as we talked about last week, we have two versions of Uraken. So we have, first of all, just don't move, we have the version where we come into the eye and we come this way for speed, and we have a version where we come round. And quite often this version, in basics, can be done as a spin. Now there are loads of variations on the footwork. I'm going to do one particular type of footwork for reasons that we're going to get into in a minute. So for this technique, we do this again as a sparring technique where I am attacking. So what I want is I want to use that first Uraken, like we did when we moved the hand and came in. I'm going to use that to cause my opponent to cover. So as I come in, he's going to cover and he's going to protect his head. Now when you cover for this, it's really important if you're practicing this technique, don't cover with the arm here. The arm needs to be really tight to the side of the head. So if Alan brings his arm up, so it's really tight, if it's there, I can hit him and he's going to be alright. If he's got a big gap here, right, you might think he's saving himself, but that arm is still going to come through. So make sure this is really tight. So we have the first Uraken and he covers. Then I'm going to spin. And that's where I'm going to use my angular momentum. So for training, he covers one, he covers two. Okay? So the footwork for this is I do my first Uraken and I use the momentum that I generate on the pullback to spin and then release my Uraken with the other hand. Now, if you watch the arms of this, what I don't do is swing the arms out. For the reasons we just discussed a minute ago, if I take my mass away from my centre, it's really slow. So when I do the first Uraken and I go for the head, I pull the arm into the body. By doing that, that allows me to spin quicker to then get the other Uraken. So from here, the technique we do is then come in for the back kick. So that's the reason we use this posture. It's to set up this hip, to then come in there, come in here, wherever I'm going to aim my kick. So we have 1, 2. You can see the momentum, so even from the spin, I can knock my opponent. If I'm doing this more as a reflex from self-defense, I'm more likely to come down to get in, rather than doing like, if I'm sparring, where I'm maybe more likely to go for the stomach. So this kind of rotational technique, 1, 2, is quite common in a lot of different karate systems and is usually done for speed. It's not a technique you want to stay in, so this is not a good posture to stay in for a long period of time. But if I'm quick, so that my opponent maybe throws a punch and I spin rapidly off it, then I can get quite a nice attack, utilising angular momentum. Now for some people, they hate the idea of spinning, and if that's what that's totally fine. But it is a possibility when utilising backfist. So even if you don't practice it yourself, you need to be aware of it, because you need to be aware that somebody else could try to do it. And from my experience with this technique, that is the best time to do it. It's to do it with an opponent that isn't expecting the spin. So I wouldn't try and overdo this technique in sparring or coming down. I just every so often, when the opportunity presents itself, do it. So one way you can do that from a punch with an attack. So just if I'm proposing just a simple punch just as a starting point, when you first learn this, start with the punch there and rotate the feet. Now another thing to talk about momentum is we want to bring the mass close to the centre. Just like when we did linear momentum, you need to consolidate your mass. You want to unify. So what you shouldn't do, I'm going to exaggerate this, is go and be really tall. So when you do this, there should be a drop in the body, whether you're striking Shidan or whether you're striking jogger. Okay? You can do it inside, you can do it outside. It's okay as a basic to just go 1 and then 2. What you want to do later is you don't want to then obviously practice with your opponent static, because your opponent won't be static. So as your opponent's punch comes in, you want to try and blend with it. So you're not blocking this way, you're blocking this way. So you use his momentum and you're going to come into his space to then spin with it Uraken. So as he comes, that's what you're aiming to do. Okay? So one more time, and then spin. Obviously from there you've still got the option of the kick. Okay? So angular momentum is its own concept, different to linear and different to kinetic energy. Key point is think about the point around which you're rotating, think about consolidating the mass and bringing it closer to the centre, because you'll generate a lot more speed. And this isn't just specific to Uraken, it's specific to any technique with rotation, even Gyakuzuki, and then you have the consideration that you're converting angular momentum into linear momentum, which is another thing called to itself. So hopefully that was useful. We're going to do next week, we are going to do one more video on Backfist like a Bushi, which is sort of going to bring all the things we talked about together and do one last sort of fun technique, if you will, that we do for our green belt. So if you're new to the channel, guys, we do videos every Friday. So every Friday at midnight, we post videos onto our YouTube channel. So feel free to get them. We do extra bonus videos every so often throughout the week, but we do at least one once a week. So feel free to subscribe to get everything. And if not, see you next week. Cheers, guys. Bye.